An absolute mess. Hello. Happy Friday. I hope everyone is having a good Friday so far. I am just getting ready. I'm going to be heading to a old friend's house, former business partner, for some coffee. So I'm just getting ready. I actually have a nail that broke. I do my own nails. I just started doing my own nails. But hello, Francisco. So while I fix my broken nail, I'm going to be watching a video. And I'm going to set you guys up so you guys can watch the video with me while I get ready. How are you, Francisco? Okay. Give me a thumbs up if you can see this. Okay, so today we're watching the Fed cuts rates by 0.5%.
Well, we finally got the results of the highly anticipated Federal Reserve rate cut. Jerome Powell just moments ago announced that the rate cut is going to be 50 basis points. So 0.5%. That's a sizable rate cut. That was on the high end. The real options were between 25, a quarter point cut, and 50. And he went with 50. And there's a lot that went with this decision. We have commentary from Jay Powell himself. We have how many Fed officials voted for this change. And we can see the immediate impact it's having on our stocks. So in this episode, we'll be looking overall at the Fed's decision to cut by 50 basis points. Now, by now, you've probably seen this news story. This is something that it was announced a couple days ago, and it's received a lot of criticism. Andy Jassy, the CEO of Amazon, has announced that they are flattening the organization. They're getting rid of a lot of middle management. They've also announced that they're requiring employees of Amazon to come into the office 5 days a week. And a lot of people are unhappy about this. It's received a ton of criticism on X, on different social media. There's people saying that this is the end for Amazon. They're comparing Amazon to IBM. But I want to look at this decision and see Amazon's reasoning for doing this. And then we also had some unshocking news today. Tupperware, the food container company, they filed for bankruptcy. They don't even believe they're going to be able to continue on their operations. We'll be looking at what happened here, the inevitable demise of a company like Tupperware, and how investors may better avoid these type of traps. Now we'll start off with the main story. Jay Powell has decided that it's time to lower interest rates by 50 basis points, which is 0.5%. The options were clear. He had to choose between 25 basis points or 50. Both of them would set a path that we're going to lower interest rates in the future, but you either had the chance of kind of easing in with a smaller rate cut or jumping big to start. And he chose that second option. Now, it's important to note that investors really didn't know what direction they were going to go. A lot of investors thought it was going to be a 25 basis point cut. In fact, every major bank except for JP Morgan predicted a 25 basis point cut. And we can see that in how the markets are moving today. If we look at the Dow Jones, there's a large spike right after the announcement was made. It's up 0.5%. We look at the S&P 500 and it's even a greater spike, 0.7% directly after this news. The QQQ is up likewise 0.6%. That's the immediate reaction from the market, and it's certainly going to change throughout the day. Interest rates going down is mathematically beneficial for stocks. The only time this calculation changes is if the entire economy enters into a recession. That is the risk going on right now. And that is what Jay Powell said in this announcement. The committee has gained greater confidence that inflation is moving down sustainably towards 2%. With the dual mandate, the Fed has to fight inflation and worry about stable employment. Now, the Fed is saying here that inflation has been won. We have beat inflation. It is headed sustainably down to 2%. So they are spiking the football with inflation. They are putting the victory flag in the ground. They have beat it. And I think they should. I've said for a while that the inflation story is dead. Inflation still exists, but inflation has always existed. Right now, it's currently headed down below 3%. When inflation is into the 2% range, that is close to its historical average. So inflation is no longer a pressing concern for the economy. There's always a chance it could go back up, but there's always that chance in the future anyway. Right now, from the data we have, inflation's coming down. The other part of their mandate has now become a greater concern. They say, continuing on with this, and judges that the risks of achieving its employment and inflation goals are roughly in balance. If I was able to talk to the Fed and really narrow them down to a single answer of what is a greater concern right now, I'm confident that they would say rising unemployment is a greater concern than inflation. The calculation has shifted from inflation to employment. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in a big rush to bring interest rates back down. But starting off with a 50 basis point cut shows that they're seeing the weakness in the economy and in the labor market, and they're concerned about it. Now, every time we get a rate cut like this, the Fed goes on to explain a little bit of the reasoning behind it, and they did so today with their press briefing. JPAL gives an overview of their frame of thought when making this decision.
Our economy is strong overall and has made significant progress toward our goals over the past 2 years. The labor market has cooled from its formerly overheated state. Inflation
could say the
eased
same about
substantially
Canada.
from a peak of 7% to an estimated 2.2% as of August. We're committed to maintaining our economy's strength by supporting maximum employment and returning inflation to our 2% goal. Today, the Federal Open Market Committee decided to reduce the degree of policy restraint by lowering our policy interest rate by a half percentage point. This decision reflects our growing confidence that with an appropriate recalibration of our policy stance, strength in the labor market can be maintained in a context of moderate growth and inflation moving sustainably down to 2%.
He starts off this meeting by saying that they've beat inflation, now they're concerned about the labor market, but they believe and have full confidence that the labor market can hold strong as long as they get back to equilibrium. The fact is that right now, Jerome Powell is known as the Fed chair that beat inflation. He's done a great job bringing inflation back down. But the question becomes whether or not he leaves the economy in good shape or not. If he's too restrictive and the economy goes down, he'll still be remembered as a Fed chair that was so-so. So his major priority right now is making sure he leaves his position with the strong economy. And I'm guessing, looking into this, he's going to talk about how strong the economy is.
You may not realize this, but you are witnessing something very rare. Not one.
Recent indicators suggest that economic activity has continued to expand at a solid pace. GDP rose at an annual rate of 2.2% in the first half of the year. In the labor market, conditions have continued to cool. Payroll job gains averaged 116,000 per month over the past 3 months, a notable step down from the pace seen earlier in the year. The unemployment rate has moved up but remains low at 4.2%. Nominal wage growth has eased over the past year, and the jobs-to-workers gap has narrowed. Overall, a broad set of indicators suggests that conditions in the labor market are now less tight than just before the pandemic in 2019.
So right now, the overall picture is that the economy is strong. It continues on, but the labor market is on a path of getting weaker and weaker. And Jerome Powell needs to make sure the labor market doesn't continue down this path. This shift in concern for the Fed between their dual mandate continually gets more and more stressed throughout this meeting.
As inflation has declined and the labor market has cooled, the upside risks to inflation have diminished and the downside risks to employment have increased. We now see the risks to achieving our employment and inflation goals as roughly in balance.
Now again, Jerome Powell says that there's an equilibrium between the concerns. They're equally concerned about inflation and unemployment. If I was to guess, or at least have my input, I think right now the unemployment's a bigger issue. One of these is trending down, which is inflation. Unemployment is the thing right now trending up. And I think that's the biggest thing on the minds of the Fed. If you look at unemployment over just the past couple of years, in 2022 it was 3.6%, which is super low. At this point, employees have a lot of bartering power. They can increase their pay. A lot of good things happen for employees. Now it zigs and zags a little bit, but generally speaking, the unemployment rate is going up. It went up to 3.8% in 2023. And then especially in the beginning of 2024, you notice that the unemployment rate is really starting to rise at a faster pace than it has previously. And of course, the Fed is very concerned about the trend. The total unemployment level right now of 4.3% is not too bad. That's not the highest it's ever been. It's not super concerning in isolation, but the trend is what's concerning. The fact that unemployment is on the rise. And if the Fed continued with high interest rates and strict monetary policy, we could see this go from the not so problematic range of 4.3% up to 5% and 6%. And that's where this becomes a big problem. When we look at the overall tenure of Jay Powell as the Fed chair, I think he's done a pretty good job so far. If I was to give him a small criticism, one that I think is easy to make in hindsight but difficult at the time, is that he was a little late in raising interest rates to combat inflation. He was a little late to the game. That made it so he had to raise interest rates really fast all at once, and that wasn't the optimal scenario. It would have been better if he raised interest rates a bit more gradually from the start. Now, of course, that's Monday morning quarterback criticism, but I think what Jay Powell's doing here by lowering interest rates by 50 basis points instead of 25 is the opposite. He's wanting to get ahead of the curve. He doesn't want to be late to the game again. Jay Powell understands that this data of the unemployment rate is a lagging indicator. He understands that when you raise or lower interest rates, it takes around 6 months to take full effect. So it's going to take time for these interest rates to work into the economy. And we don't want unemployment to raise up too much before these interest rates hit. So I agree with him that overall, it's probably better to go with the bigger cut than the smaller one. Now moving on, this is news that you may have seen before. It was upsetting to a lot of people. It was Andy Jassy, the CEO of Amazon, having a message for employees. And there was two different parts of this message. The first part I think is less objectionable or inflammatory or upsetting to different people. He basically says that we're flattening the management system of Amazon. He says that we want to operate like the world's largest startup. That means having passion for constantly inventing for customers, strong urgency. He calls it a big race, an opportunity. He says high ownership, fast decision making, scrappiness and frugality, deeply connected collaboration. You need to be joined at the hip with your teammates when inventing and solving hard problems, and a shared commitment to each other. This is all culture jargon. It's good stuff, but this is stuff that we hear, all culture stuff. He goes on to describe how Amazon has grown incredibly fast over the past couple of years. Since COVID, they've added on hundreds of thousands of corporate employees. And in many cases, when companies do this, you've seen the outcome. There's tons of middle management, tons of red tape, unnecessary processes. They say that there's pre-meetings to pre-meetings for the decision meetings. A longer line of managers feeling like they need to review a topic before it moves forward. Owners of different initiatives feel like they should make less recommendations because the decisions will be made elsewhere. There's basically so many layers of management at Amazon, it's difficult to push anything forward and make real progress. So they've decided that each S-team organization is going to increase the ratio of individual contributors to managers by at least 15% by the end of Q1 of 2025. Having fewer managers will remove layers and flatten the organization more than they are today. So thing number one that Amazon's doing is taking this vast layer of management and they're flattening it. This is very similar to what other companies have done as well. Flattening the organization makes it so that things can move a little faster. So this seems like a necessary change, and so far I haven't seen too many people upset about this change. It seems like it's all good for Amazon. It's when we get to point two, where there's a lot of different opinions online. They say to address this second issue of being better set up to invent, collaborate, and connect through each other, and through the culture to deliver the absolute best for customers and the business, we've decided that we're going to return to being in the office the way we were before the onset of COVID. When we look back over the last 5 years, we continue to believe that the advantages of being together in the office are significant. COVID came around, people started working from home, and a lot of companies, in fact, most of them have kept that hybrid work from home policy. But now Amazon is changing. We've observed that it's easier for our teammates to learn, model, practice, and strengthen our culture. Collaborating, brainstorming, and inventing are simpler, more effective. Teaching and learning from one another are more seamless, and the teams tend to better connect to one another. If anything, the last 15 months that we've moved back into the office for at least 3 days a week has strengthened our conviction about the benefits. So Amazon used to just allow people to work from home. Then they altered the policy and said you need to come in for 3 days a week. People weren't too upset about that, and they saw massive benefits for people coming in 3 days a week. And they're saying if the benefits are so big for them being in 3 days a week, we want them in 5 days a week. The announcement of this policy sparked a lot of debate. People furious about this. Amazon employees, in many cases, upset about this as well. We also got a lot of hot takes on Twitter from large accounts. Bucko Capital saying that Amazon is now the only mega cap tech company requiring employees to work full-time in the office. They've also been dead money since COVID, unlike their peers. Hybrid work ain't the problem, but it's a convenient excuse when something else is broken. Daniel Hare has pinned this news and says that Amazon is becoming a dinosaur, like IBM. Many people have suggested that this is a way of telling Amazon's best employees to go find a different job. And these posts further highlight the hypocrisy and inconsistency that Amazon is treated compared to other big tech companies. A couple of years ago, in fact, just 1 year ago, Meta came out with their Year of Efficiency. This is a big letter, very similar to Amazon's today. In this letter, Mark Zuckerberg did very similar things to what Andy Jassy did. He said that we're going to flatten the organization. We're going to have it so that there's less middle management. That's almost exactly what Andy Jassy said. The first part of his letter was flattening the organization, making it so that you can do better collaboration. The second part of this is that Meta is laying off 10,000 employees. They're simply firing them. And in fact, 5,000 additional employees that they had as open roles won't be hired. With these two different letters that are very similar, one from Andy Jassy and one from Mark Zuckerberg, we see a very different reaction. The reaction from Amazon requiring employees to come back in the office 5 days a week has received incredible levels of criticism. People saying that this is the worst thing the company can be doing. And you compare that to Mark Zuckerberg firing 10,000 employees, and that was applauded for strong leadership and turning the company more efficient. But when I look at it overall, I see them as more similar than different. In both cases, you have CEOs making the work environment a bit more strict. In both cases, they're flattening the management, making the org structure more simple, making it so that your average employee has more ownership over their tasks. And I believe with Amazon, it will have a very similar impact that it did with Meta. The biggest impact this had with Meta was making the company more lean, more efficient. Cash flows grew dramatically after Meta implemented this. With Amazon, we have a company that generates a lot of cash, but it also has a lot of employees, where the stock-based compensation eats up a lot of that cash generation. Amazon needs to work to become a leaner organization. Now, the thing that I think is most interesting about this story, and something that I have yet to see pointed out, is that Amazon is not a company that makes decisions like this on a whim. They're not a company that just willy-nilly guesses and makes decisions. They're one of the most data-dependent companies in the world. They employ thousands of different economists at Amazon. They have an S team that carefully pores over every single possible outcome of every decision. They model the outcomes with computers. There's some reason that Amazon believes it is best for employees to come in 5 days a week. Now, whether or not they're giving it in the statement,
Any thoughts on this,
whether they really
guys?
believe it's just a cultural issue, we don't know. There could be some other hidden reasons, some data, some different metrics they see that are causing them to make this decision. Employees are going to be upset. Some of them will quit. Some of them will move to competitors of Amazon. Amazon will lose some talent in the process. Amazon already knows about that. Andy Jassy has ran the numbers. He knows that some employees are going to be upset. He knows that some talent's going to move to competitors. He knows that, yet he made the decision anyway. There's something that Amazon has found out with working in office that they deem so valuable that it makes up for any of these other concerns. We don't have full transparency of what that is. It may be simply the statement they
You get
gave,
people used to
or it may be
something and then
else.
to take it
But
away.
I think a lot of other
For
companies
sure
are going
people
to
are
pay
going to be
attention to
bothered by
this.
that.
Because Amazon did not make this decision lightly, and I don't believe they made it without a very convincing reason to do so. Now, moving on, we get to the news that Tupperware, the food container pioneer, files for bankruptcy. When I saw this news, it was a little sad. I was a little bit sad because of the nostalgia. I grew up knowing about Tupperware. These were the food containers. And in fact, Tupperware was more than just a food container company. Tupperware was like the Google of food containers. You'd use Tupperware as the word to describe storing your food. So it's a little bit sad to see it go, but this is what happens with brands that don't have sustained moats. The Tupperware brand was introduced in the 1940s by the chemist Earl Tupper, and I didn't know it was named after him. Earl Tupper is what it's named after, who developed a clean and durable plastic to create airtight containers. Now I see an immediate problem to this. It's made out of plastic. And I don't know if you've heard the news, but plastic has gone out of style. We found out that there's microplastics in everything. So the idea of storing your food in plastic to a lot of people is now a lot less appealing. People are buying
I always
glass
store my
food
stuff in
containers,
plastic.
metal ones, anything but
Am I
plastic.
behind?
So that's another problem You may have thought that it's fine to store your food in plastic and this company's going to do well.
I don't think I have
but
one
then
glass
some new
container.
science comes out, some discovery. All
My
of a
mom
sudden,
does,
that
but I
becomes the
don't have
wrong way
any.
to do something. Now, of course, anytime a company like this goes out of business, they have a lot of different things to blame. One of the things they blamed was a challenging macroeconomic environment. They say that the company began facing financial headwinds and declining sales in 2019. It cited the COVID-19 lockdowns in China, the war in Ukraine, global supply chain disruptions, the rising price of resin, a chief raw material they use, and on and on. Notice how none of the actual excuses or concerns they cite are competition. And I think this is something that management often does. Managers don't want to admit that they sell a commodity that was easy to compete with and they got beat out by a host of competitors. So it's easier to blame something way out of their control. This was China or Ukraine or the global supply chain. It wasn't the fact that there's 100 other food companies that are selling food containers. That had nothing to do with it. This was all global macro stuff. I don't buy it. Food containers are still a big business. They're still in every grocery store. They're just not Tupperware's business. They say that they're closing all their remaining U.S. manufacturing plants, and they're laying off 148 employees in January. So say goodbye to the end of the legacy of Tupperware. That's all for this episode. See you in the next one.
Poor Tupperware. Interesting. Okay, Stephanie. What is this next video, actually? Okay, how am I gonna fix this now? Well, this is taking longer than I thought. I thought by the end of this video I would be finished my broken nail, and I'm not. Did you guys enjoy that video or what? How's it going, everybody? What is everybody doing on this lovely Friday? I have to leave for a meeting soon. So I'm trying to do this as fast as I can. But for some reason, there, I think I'm good. Not bad, eh? I should become a nail tech. I told my friend that I want to try to do her nails and see how I do. That would be a fun business to get into. And I feel like I wouldn't charge as crazy as like other people. Because, you know, sometimes you got to stand out. These nail prices are ridiculous these days. But for me, I would still go across the street, $40 to do my nails. You won't catch me paying no $100, $200 to do freaking nails. Nope. I don't care how rich I am or how much money I have. I could never. There's just like certain things that I could just never spend my money on. Like, what's the need? Before I leave, oh my gosh, I'm running behind. I made some yummy pasta last night, so that is going to be my lunch for today. Don't you love when you cook a bunch of food for dinner and then you have leftovers the next day and you don't have to be cooking 24/7? I hate cooking all the time. It's not fun. Okay. Anyways, I have to get out of here, so I'm going to rush. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for watching the video with me and keeping me company, guys. I hope you have a great Friday and an amazing weekend. Stay safe.